All right, all right, all right. We're coming in hot with another episode of Camp Content, and today we are joined by Craig Andrews, who is the founder of Allies for me.com. I want to say for you, alliesforme.com, which is an agency that works with people who sell high ticket items to help with their marketing and really draw people in to. They take people out of the proposal game, right? That is the quote. So we're excited to talk to Craig today because he has a very unique spin on client attraction through your website and what does that look like and how you should approach it and how you should view it. And I think it'll be helpful for anybody that has a website and is looking to capture the audience that is already coming or potential people who will be coming to their website. So, especially if you have a high ticket offer. So, this is one that you don't want to miss today. So, thank you, Craig, for joining us on the show today. It's nice to see you here. Definitely been looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, Molly, I really want to thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this. I so enjoyed our conversation a few weeks ago. When I saw this pop up on my calendar, I'm like, the day is here. Thank you.
Oh, you're too kind. You're too kind. Thank you. Right on. Well, it's good to see you here for lots of reasons because part of your story is we almost didn't see you here at all. So, and I love a good near-death story because I have one myself. When I was born, they said I wouldn't live more than 20 years. Team of doctors at Bethesda Naval, but that's why they call it practicing medicine, right? So they're just practicing, frankly. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about your story to get here.
Well, thankfully, the doctors were wrong in your case, and the doctors were wrong in my case. They told my wife for a solid month that I was going to die. They actually had her meet with hospice to start planning the day they're going to pull the plug. And so this all happened. This all went down in August of 2021, and I had COVID. I had really bad COVID, and I walked in the hospital on what was it? August 10th. Walked in on August 10th, and August 21st they came to me and they said, "Hey, we're going to give you something to help you sleep." And I wish I'd asked what that was because it turned out to be an armful of morphine. And which, if you know anything about morphine, it kind of suppresses respiration. And so a few hours later, they called my wife in the middle of the night. They said, "Hey, we're going to put your husband on the ventilator." She said he doesn't want to be on the ventilator. And they laughed at her and said, "Well, if he doesn't go on the ventilator, he'll be dead in 24 hours. And
Jeez.
She said, "Well, yeah. And she said, "Well, how many people have you had survive?" And he said, "None have survived." This was the Delta variant of COVID. And basically, if you went on the ventilator with Delta, you died. I, in fact, was the first person to leave that ICU alive. Very few followed me. I mean, like single digits, few followed me out of there alive. But something really interesting happened. They put me in a coma and I was out for 6 weeks. And when I woke up, my trust in the doctors had plummeted. It had fallen through the floor. I didn't trust the doctors at all. And at the same time, my trust in my wife had skyrocketed. It went through the roof. And it was really interesting. The doctors would come to me and say, "Hey, we want to do something, such and such." And if the doctors were asking, my answer was no. So they'd have to go talk to my wife. They'd talk to her. She'd come to me and say, "Hey, the doctors want to do this." And I'd ask her, "Is it safe?" And she says, "Oh, yeah." And looking back at some of their requests now, they were immensely reasonable. But my brain was scrambled. I wasn't thinking clearly. But the one thing I knew was I did not trust the doctors. And, it kind of tied in, as I woke up and, started on the path of recovery, I started thinking about something that we had been doing. We do this thing called first time offer. We can talk about that more, but it hit me. I was like, oh my goodness. I understand another facet of why those work. And it reminds me of a Maya Angelou quote. That is that people will forget what you said. They will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And it turns out, while I was out for 6 weeks, the doctors were saying some things around me they shouldn't have. and my wife was saying much different things. Actually, originally they told my wife, they said, well, you can't visit. And she said, well, if he's going to die, he's not going to die alone. And they're like, well, you still can't visit. And she said, wrong answer. And so she bullied her way into the hospital, and they gave her an hour a day. And so she'd come into me, and for 1 hour, she'd sing to me, and she'd pray over me, and she'd say words of encouragement. And the doctors were saying much different things. And when I woke up, about a week and a half after I woke up and my mind started clearing, I realized some of the things I believed about reality were wrong. I'd been having these dreams, and for me, the dreams were reality. And I asked my wife, I said, hey, were we ever in Louisiana? And she's like, no, why do you say that? And I said, well, in my world, we went to a resort in Louisiana to convalesce. And she's like, nope, haven't been there. And I started telling her about what happened at this one resort. I was in Louisiana for a while, actually doing different things. But I told her about how at one point she came up to me and she put her hand on my left shoulder and said, Craig, this is Karen. I'm your wife. It's going to be okay.
Huh.
And Karen sat back and she said, Craig, I said that to you when you were in your coma. And, it reminds me of this Maya Angelou quote. People will forget what you said. They will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And the doctors were speaking death and despair into me, but my wife was speaking words of hope and life. And it polarized those two relationships. And it hit me. I was like, holy cow, that's what we do with customers when we take them through our first time offer. We're influencing how they feel. And as long as we're speaking life and hope into them, and a few other things, they come away just trusting us at insane levels in very short periods of time.
I love it. Wow. That's pretty deep, Craig. That's a lot, man. That's a lot.
Very interesting. So did you know they were...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
Good. I was just going to say, did you know they were going to put you into this coma for 6 weeks, or was it just kind of like boom, and then you woke up like thinking, hey, the Longhorns are playing tomorrow. You wake up 6 weeks later and you're like, did they win last night?
No. My last two memories was before it was lights out were one, the nurse saying they were going to give me something to help me sleep, which sleep had been hard. And so I was looking forward to that, but I knew morphine was bad. I went back and checked my text messages with my wife, and 3 days earlier, they gave me morphine. I texted my wife. I said, they gave me morphine, bad idea. I had to spend the whole morning on my stomach, which facilitates better breathing. So that was one memory. And then the doctor who was in charge of the ICU came by and scolded me for a few moments and then left. And it hit me. I was like, after, on the hindsight of this, I was like, what a scumbag. He knew exactly what was going to happen in the next 24 hours. He knew, in his mind, he thought I was a dead man. And the last thing he wants to say to a dying man is to scold me. It's like, what a horrible, horrible human being.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in hospitals, unfortunately. I've had lots of spinal surgeries, and there's always a good nurse or two, and then the rest of the experiences are typically very bad, to be honest. That's just sort of how it is,
So after this all happened, was there, you talk about kind of these inspiring quotes and all kind of a different outlook. Was there a different approach when you got back to work with Allies for Me? Like, hey, but maybe we should shift and really concentrate on some of these certain things, or kind of, change the way you approach customers or clients and stuff like that?
I'm proud to say it didn't shift much because, I feel like we were headed in the right direction. I mean, let me brag on my team for a second. So like I said, I woke up 6 weeks later, my mind scrambled. I believed all sorts of weird things. I couldn't talk for much of that because I still had a trach in my throat. And, but when my mind started clearing, my wife started filling me in on what had been going on in the world. And I found out my team kept running the business without me.
Awesome.
And not only that, freelancers reached out to my team and said, as long as Craig's in the hospital, we'll do whatever's necessary. Just let us know.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's my proudest professional accomplishment.
So you had kind of already built that base culture and commitment and everything, and it was just like you said, just a great thing to see that when you came back, it was like this is still running, still going in the right direction, still on the up and up, and still good.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll tell you what it did change, and this is it is by far been the best thing that ever happened to my marriage. It transformed my relationship with my wife, and that has been wonderful.
That's awesome. You know what? Cheers for wholesomeness and growth and vulnerability and honesty. You know, like almost dying. You know, when you're facing your maker, right? When you're laying in that bed and you think this might be my last breath, or maybe the next one, or the one afterwards. It really does shift your perspective on things. It shines gratitude in different places if you're lucky, right? I think some people come out a little different, but I think almost dying kind of like defragments your hard drive. You know what I mean? It sets you straight a little bit. You're like, let me put these in the right place, and the little things become even littler, you know, and you tend to focus on what matters more.
Yeah, you look at some of the stupid arguments you get into as as a married person, you're like, okay, that's really dumb. And there have been a couple times. I mean, we're still human beings. We're not perfect. We still get crossways. And something we've said to each other has been, we've been given a second chance. We don't have to do it the same way we did before.
I love that. I mean, you don't have to, or I don't have to do this anymore, might be one of the most powerful statements in the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when you actually have that realization and you're like, I don't have to do this anymore. I mean, it's so freeing. And you're right. You don't have to do it the same way. You got a second opportunity. You can do it. You can write the story a whole new way. What a crazy thing.
Yeah. And, and the other thing I'd say is it's made me bolder. It didn't make me more scared of death. It made me less afraid of death.
I can dig that for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, so here's a funny story. This has no business application. This is just fun. So I was, I was in 3 hospitals. The third and final hospital was a rehab hospital. And I had 3 hours of rehab every day, and 1 hour was speech therapy. Well, it turns out speech therapists do more than just speech. They're there to kind of check in on you mentally, see how your brain's functioning, figure out how your emotions are, see if you need a referral. And, I live in Austin. I live in Southwest Austin, but where the rehab hospital I was in South Austin, which has long had a hippie vibe that's unfortunately being replaced with a gentrified vibe. But, it's South Austin's the hippie part of Austin.
Right.
And I had this speech therapist named Ezra, and she was a South Austin hippie in every way. And and she says, "Now, Craig, you came really close to death, and I'm sure you've realized that. How are you dealing with that?" And I sat there and listened to her question. And I said, "Well, I'm probably have an advantage over most." And she's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I spent 6 years in the Marines, and they decondition you to death, or they desensitize you to death." And she said, "Well, how'd they do that?" I said, "Well, they have you sing songs." She's like, "Really? Songs desensitize you to death?" I said, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, what do you mean?" And so I sang her a couple lines of a song called "My Girl's a Vegetable," and and I saw on her face what looked like physical pain, and she was like, "Okay, got it."
Yeah.
And she never asked about that again. And and it's it's part of the cost. I mean, if we're gonna have just for clarity, I think we could have skipped almost every war we got ourselves in the last half century. I don't think those were good. I think they were good business for defense contractors, but I think we could. I'm not a war hawk, but we do need to have people ready to stand and defend the country, and to have those people conditioned, you have to do things like that to their heads. And I'll say that my time in the Marine Corps has been, instrumental in my recovery, because it's been hard. I had to learn how to walk again.
Yeah.
Sure.
When I woke up, I could wiggle a finger and a toe, but that was it. And it was only the last week in the hospital before, pardon the crassness of it, but it was the last week in the hospital before I could even wipe my own butt.
It's crazy.
And the Marines gave me a mental toughness to, kind of push through the hard days.
That's incredible.
It's no joke. It's no joke at all, man. Well, I'm glad you made it through. What a journey it's been. When you have, it's very humbling to have to learn how to like ask for help and learn how to walk and talk and do all that again. It's really impressive that you've been able to jump back into your business as swiftly as you've been able to. So, congratulations for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
And
For sure.
and
So let's talk a little bit about the business, because what I really want to talk about next is this idea of banishing the word lead magnet from your business kingdom, and talking a little bit more about that, because I'm really kind of pushing back on this funnel idea, and this. It's very misleading. People think because they build a funnel and a nurturing sequence that people are going to end up in it. But you have to spend. You got to do a lot of advertising. You got to have a large amount of something in order to funnel it into a small amount of something, right? And so I feel like it really dehumanizes the whole operation. Like, people aren't leads; they're people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of real quick tying into what Molly's saying here, if you could kind of expand on this a little bit. Like, when you go to your homepage of your website, the biggest thing right there just says, "We help companies attract strangers and convert them into high-paying customers." So like a dumbed-down version of that is kind of like, we help these random people pay you a lot of money.
That's right.
So I just love, because I've never really seen that. Like, we're going to attract strangers and we're going to turn them into high-paying people here for you.
So let's talk about that.
Well, I went the path of a lot of marketers, and I learned the marketing lingo, funnels, hacking, hacking and all that stuff. And the term lead magnet, and I just actually, for the most part, I skipped that. I use that language primarily to talk to other marketers. So originally we call them white papers, and I used to market high tech, and so that's probably where a lot of that comes from. I marketed chips for mobile phones, and pushed over $500 million of revenue in that world. And so from that world, we used the term white papers, and it was funny. Early on, I had white paper, I'd gone through and edited it, and I handed it off to my editor, and she sends it back, and she said, "Craig, I'm not making this up. I swear I'm not making this up." She sends it back, says, "Craig, this is way too engaging. I fixed it." And by fixed it, she made it boring. I'm like, "Why'd you do that?" And she said, "Well, white papers are supposed to be boring." I'm like, "No, they're not." No. I said, I can only think of one case where you would intentionally write something boring. And that would be if you're a CFO and you have to do an annual report, and there's a disclosure that has to be in the report that you really don't want to put in there. You write as boring as you can, so you hope people give up before they get to that disclosure. Other than that, why would you ever write anything boring? And so at that point, I banished the term white papers, and I started calling them info papers. And the more I hung out with marketers, they kept using this term lead magnets. It always bothered me. I was like, because it just seems too mercenary. It seems, like you said, dehumanizes the person. I think it puts you in the wrong mindset. I think your mindset has to be that you're here to serve your customers. Mm-hmm. And if your mindset's anything else, I think you're in the wrong mindset. And why would you start that with how you name the way that you're going to attract your customers?
Mm-hmm. And kind of building on the wrong mindset and boring things, kind of looking at this, the one part, you don't like contact us forms. That shouldn't be the first thing that a customer or potential client should see.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of that is just, it's more recognizing where they are. So we have a client now that they do managed offshore they do outsource software development for companies. And the big call to action on their homepage was get a quote. I'm like, really? You think a complete stranger is going to come to your website and that's the button they're going to click? And so we think about it as like stages of courtship, and we kind of put it into 5 big groupings in terms of stages. You have an introduction, and once you have the introduction, then you have conversation. If conversation goes well, then you have coffee. And if coffee goes well, then you have dinner. If dinner goes well, then you have commitment. And saying request a quote is like skipping all those steps in between.
Yeah, especially if there's drinks at dinner.
Yeah. Well, it just, it's funny. I mean, one, people don't like to be sold. And two, and again, we work in the high ticket space. I mean, if you're selling stuff that's, less than $100, we don't work in that space, and that's not our mindset. That's not how we work. But, usually people ask me what high ticket is, and I say high ticket is high ticket in the through the eyes of whoever's writing the check. If for them it's high ticket, then it is high ticket. But typically that means 4, 5, 6, 7 figure deals. It really depends. And even at let's say $1,000. Let's say you're asking somebody to spend $1,000, and let's say it's a business. You may say, well, $1,000 is nothing. For a business, they'll waste that much money debating spending $1,000, which they will. But the fact is that they will have that debate. And so, I talked about first time offers. That's kind of the equivalent of a coffee date. We liken that to the coffee date. And we price those so cheaply that nobody ever has to ask permission to spend that money. And that's where and the whole point of that is it's like moving from conversation to the coffee date. You want to advance the relationship. They're talking to you because they think maybe there's something big. Just like the reason you go on coffee dates is not to find the people you don't want to date. You find the people you do want to date. And so they're talking to you because they're hopeful that you can help them solve a problem in their life. But they're not ready to sign that big contract.
Yeah, and I like how you kind of break it down as one of your inbound problems. It's like, all right, if you were your own customer, would you take a cold call from yourself? Would you go through and just fill out your own contact us form or contact form initial thing like that? It's just like, it's a very good way to break it down and kind of look at it there.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, I see this shift all the time. People think, I've actually had people tell me, I asked somebody once, I said, what have you bought recently? That's somewhat expensive. And they say couch. And I said, well, how did you buy it? And I got them to describe the process. And I asked them, I said, okay, at what point in that process did you talk to sales? And they proudly said, oh, I never talked to sales. And I'm looking at their website, and the only engagement you can make on their website is to talk to sales. And I said, okay, so can you help me understand why you expect your customers to behave differently than you would in the same situation? And I swear they sat there and said, well, because we're better. We're just really good. And I'm like, you're delusional.
Yeah. And then once you personalize it with their own real world experience, they kind of, oh, that does make sense. Yeah.
No, they didn't. They couldn't connect the dots.
Oh, really? They still couldn't? Oh.
They couldn't. Yeah. No, they were delusional. We didn't work with
them. Fair enough then. See ya.
Yeah. I say to clients a lot, like, when people ask me like, well, how long should the podcast episode be? Or how long, and I always say, well, if you want to know how the market acts, if you want to know how consumers act, think about how do you act, right? Do you watch long videos? Do you like short videos? How long do you want your podcast to be? Like, you can answer those questions yourself if you really like turn the table. Yeah. It's a really valid point. You said something to me on our initial call that really stuck with me about how to craft a first time offer and what does that really look like. And you made a comment about a first time offer should be something that you can do, at a low cost. But it would be imagining if one of your best friends hit you up and said, I want to do this thing. Can you give me a few hours of your time? like what would you tell them to do? I'm probably butchering that, but can you expand on that, because that really resonated with me a lot.
No, I mean, you got you're very, very accurate. It's the biggest barrier when we're building these first time offers. And I tell you what, let me kind of pause and let me give a couple examples so your audience can visualize what we're talking about. I'll give an example of 2 first time offers. We didn't create them, but I think everybody can relate to them. So when the first one is when albums were popular the first time, there was this offer where by Columbia House Records, we'll give you 13 albums for a penny. And so if you're the type of person that wants to build up a record collection, 1 penny gets you 13 steps closer. And we would call that a simple offer. If you're doing high ticket sales, that type of offer is not going to work for you. So here's another offer. Again, we didn't make it, but everybody can relate to it. There was a guy named Bob Stupak that bought some dumpy old hotel at the end of the Vegas Strip, and it's now called the Strat, or it's the Strat. It was the Stratosphere, but when he bought it, it was a dumpy old place that nobody wanted to go to, and he renamed it Bob Stupak's Vegas World. And he ran a special. He said, "Give me $396, and I will give you 3 days and 2 nights in one of my deluxe suites. When you arrive, there will be a bottle of champagne waiting for you in your room. All of your drinks on property are free, whether you're gambling or not. Even if you're sitting in one of our entertainment lounges, you pay nothing more for your drinks. Not only that, but for your $396, I will give you $600 of chips to use in my casino."
Huh.
Yeah, so Molly, for those that are listening, Molly's mouth just gaped open because that's a shocking offer. It's hard if you're the type of person, and this is really key, if you're the type of person that likes to drink and gamble, it's hard to say no to that offer.
Yeah, I'm sold, because that's me right there.
I know.
I'm sold.
Can we go right now?
100%.
But that's also a complex offer. So Columbia House, 13 albums for a penny, to Bob Stupak, it's a complex offer. And so hopefully that helps your audience kind of visualize what's there. So when we put together these offers, we found that they should have a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 5 deliverables. Less than 3 feels overwhelming or underwhelming. More than 5 overwhelms the brain, confuses the brain, has trouble processing, and a confused mind won't purchase. But the biggest barrier I run into when we're trying to get somebody, when we're trying to build an offer for someone, is their insatiable desire to sell. And so when we're sitting down and doing a custom workshop with them, I devote a couple hours to moving them out of selling mode and into serving mode. And then we get to a point where we just ask them and say, and we construct a problem statement. There's a number of empathy exercises that we do. And I said, if one of your friends came to you with this problem statement, you're having dinner, and they come to you with this statement, you realize they will never be a customer for whatever reason, doesn't matter. But you decide that you're going to devote 5 hours to your life to helping your friend. What would you do in those 5 hours? And it's when we start answering that question from a servant mindset, from serving, from caring for somebody that you love, that the most amazing offers, jaw-dropping offers, that hopefully, Molly, would drop your jaw as much as Bob Stupak's offer. But that's when those come out. And I was working on one a few months ago, and it was here locally in Austin. Driving home, I called my wife, and she said, "How'd it go?" And I said, "If somebody turned down this offer, I think they'd be clinically insane." And just that good of an offer.
How does that flush out though? Like if somebody, objections like, well, if we give people too much, then they won't hire us. There won't be anything left to do. How do you manage an objection like that?
Well, and that's part of the challenge of building these offers is, you want to solve not only do you want to solve a problem, you must solve a problem. That's one of the key trust building elements. And by the way, doing an audit for someone only highlights the problems they have. It doesn't solve their problems. Or the consulting crowd come around, they say, well, we do assessments. I'm like, yeah, that's a nice word for an audit. And you're just saying, hey, I'm going to tell you the problems you have. And by the way, I've discovered there's a limited number of people in this world that want to invite me into their world to self-critique them. But you want to solve a problem, but you want to leave the big problems unsolved. And when you leave the big problems unsolved, and when you structure it, again, there's a number of structural things in putting the offer together that when you structure it properly, it naturally leads to the next step. And they naturally want to move on and become, a high ticket customer. And as a matter of fact, it's not you asking them, it's them asking you if you've done this right. One of the things that will happen, and I'm sure you run into this as you're working with people podcasting, they don't know what they don't know. They have problems that you're aware of that they are not aware of. And during the delivery of the first time offer, we have some exercises that help make them aware of those problems. We try to do it nicely where they come to the realization on their own
themselves, yeah.
As opposed to pointing fingers at them. Well, let me tell you the ways you're screwed up. It doesn't work for some reason.
Sound like my therapist, Craig.
Yeah. Well, it's fun. And, you bring up a really good point there, Molly, is you have to do this, you have to have the patience. The therapist, they're effective because they're patient. They're willing to ask questions and wait for you to get to the realization yourself. Because that's where real change comes in. But because of the structure of this is where you can start helping them understand how much more they need you than they presently realize. And when you do it nicely, when you speak words of life and hope into them, kind of like my wife did to me, doggone if they don't trust you.
Yeah. So you're just treating everybody, like you said, like your best friend, and you will be patient with your best friend. So hopefully that potential client or customer has that stepbrothers mindset. It's like, did we just become best friends? Yes. Boom. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, Craig, if people want to work with you and your company, what is the best way for them to do that?
So come to our website. It's alliesforme.com. That's spelled ALLIES, the number 4, ME.com. And we have we do have a contact form there, but we make it clear. Guess what? Our first engagement with everybody, and we say this on our website, is less than $500, and you get like $5,000 worth of value. We practice what we preach. But for your audience, we have a couple gifts, and it's not going to cost them anything.
We love gifts.
Yeah. So if you go to the website, alliesforme.com, and then add a /camp content, all lowercase, all one word, it will take you to a place where you can get 2 things. One is a guide. We didn't talk about this, but it took me 18 months of fumbling around to figure out how this, just to start getting results. My first time offer failed. My second one failed. My third one failed, but not as much. And eventually, after 18 months, I got it started to work, and I spent the last 5 years refining it. And so I wrote a guide to help you avoid some of the learning, or to accelerate the learning that I went through. And so that's one thing your audience will get. The other thing is we give 23 days access to our self-paced course. And the reason we're limiting it to 23 days is we study human behavior. And we know if you sign up for this course, you'll say, I'm going to do it next month. Next month comes, you say, I'm going to do it next month. And eventually you forget about it. You never do the course. It never changes your life. We want this to change your life. And knowing how humans respond, if we put a 23-day limit on there, guess what? People go and consume the content. We see it in the analytics. So that's the second gift.
I love it. Thank you. Well,
amazing.
I am sure our audience appreciates it. I appreciate it. I'm going to check out the guide and the self-guided course because I think we could improve upon our first time offer and conversation starter at Heartcast Media as well. So I'm definitely going to be checking that out myself. Absolutely. Well, Craig, thank you for coming on the show today. People know where to find you, alliesforme.com. So that seems pretty easy. Is there anything else that you would like to say to the audience before we head out?
No, Molly and Matt, it's been a delight. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Yeah. Sorry for opening up the world of the 6 songs the Marines sing, but that's just, that's part of what they do.
We got some great Maya Angelou quotes out of it. We're in a good spot here.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's right. Excellent. Well, Craig, thank you for your time, as always, and we look forward to seeing you again and staying in contact. And check out that offer, everybody, if you're listening, for what he just put out there. I love the 23-day access, because if you're going to do it, you might as well do it now. You could listen to it while you're making dinner. You could listen to it while you're in the shower. You could listen to it on the treadmill or on a walk or on a bike ride. There's a lot of ways that you can consume that content and learn a whole bunch of stuff at the same time. So don't sleep on that 23-day offer, because hey, there's no free lunch, but apparently there is today. So get on that. And until next time, be excellent to each other, and we'll see you soon.
Produced by Heartcast Media.